First of all, I would like to welcome everyone in the audience in the room, and I would like to welcome you all on Zoom. It's a bit of a rainy night in Ankara, so I think some people have decided to stay home and listen on Zoom, which is fine. So please feel free to introduce yourselves on Zoom wherever you are joining us this evening. And we are very, very happy to have Professor Erdem Denk with us tonight. And I will be introducing him. But before I do that, please, if you have any questions throughout the lecture, feel free to write them in the Q&A box. And don't forget to follow us on the social media channels. We have another lecture coming up on the 20th of February, following the footsteps of Gertrude Bell. So if you're interested, we would like to have you here or on Zoom again. This lecture is going to be available on YouTube. So if you're interested, you can also listen to it twice. So before any further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Erdem Denk. I'm very, very happy and excited to have him here. I met him like 6-7 months ago during one of the archaeopolitics meetings, which I assume he will be talking to us tonight, where he brings students of political science and archaeology together, and they discuss brilliant ideas and do various workshops. So I would also encourage you to have a look at the work that they are doing. Professor Denk studied international relations at the Faculty of Political Science, Mülkiye, at Ankara University, and he did his MA also there. He has his PhD from Cardiff Law School from the UK, which he got in 2005. He's currently a professor of international relations at Mülkiye, where he has been working since 1998. He's the author and editor of 12 books and several articles on various aspects of international law as well as Turkish foreign policy. I can also say that Professor Denk is very active on social media. So if you follow him, you cannot catch his pace, but you can have a look at all the wonderful work that he has been doing at the university related to archaeology, political science, and also tourism, as far as I could follow lately. He has recently been studying on law and order since Paleolithic and is preparing 3 books entitled When There Was No State, Invention of the State, and History of States. A general summary of these studies entitled 5,000 Years of World Order, Societies and Their Laws was published in 2021. And he has been organizing archaeopolitics conferences and talks since October 2022 at Mülkiye. These talks involve an archaeologist and a political scientist every month who respectively discuss prehistoric and modern aspects of any given topic. And today he will be presenting us The Politics of Archaeology. Is the Past a Foreign Country? The screen and floor is yours, hocam.
Thank you, Işılay Hanım. I should start by thanking to you all and to Işılay Hanım, Hakan Bey, and the British Institute, of course, for this kind invitation. It's my honor and privilege. Much appreciated. Thank you. My task today is to talk about the politics of archaeology, or archaeopolitics, actually. As she said, the initiative I've started some 2 or 3 years ago at Mülkiye. And in that initiative, I'm trying to combine these 2 areas. But I will just explain what I mean by that in due course, of course. Today, my presentation, it doesn't work. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, my presentation today will be in 3 main parts. In the first part, I will be talking about the politics of archaeology, of course, from the archaeopolitics points of view. In the second part, I will be trying to introduce you what archaeopolitics is. And in the third part, I will give you some examples as sort of applied archaeopolitics, I should say, from some representative samples. Okay, let's start with the politics of archaeology from an archaeopolitics point of view, of course. My first line is a famous first line, of course, the encounter between the past and the present, let's say. There you can see Napoleon, but the first line says the past is a foreign country, they do things differently there. Of course, my main question is this: do they? Or do we? Because it is implied that we are also doing things differently, but this is an assumption to me, a relevant and necessary assumption maybe in those years, but it's an assumption. So the problem is, why did they ask such a question? Because there was a need to differentiate yourself or oneself from the other in that encounter. In our context today here, that encounter was the colonial encounter, of course, because the two sides were from different worlds, in quotation, of course, and the one who visited or who encountered the other, in quotation again, were discovering the uncivilized primitive, or as they will call them, let's say. And he himself, or they themselves, were inventing we themselves as the civilized modern, of course. Why? Because they were trying to establish a new world order. They needed a new world order. And if you want to establish a new world order, you have to change everything. You have to start everything from scratch. You have to rewrite the history. You have to define yourself and the other at the same time. Why did they have such a need? Because at that age, they were not happy with their present order. I mean, not on Napoleon, it is the case for Columbus, it is the case for all those colonial encounters, because they were sort of the periphery of the present world order in Europe, because the Europe were the Christendom, or the Holy Roman Empire, I should say, were being governed by the clerics and the monarchs. And these guys were not happy with that. They were trying to find something new or replace the world order with their own order, of course, which will be the nation state order and liberal Western order, of course. And within this context, they not only invented themselves, they also invented industrial capitalism, or industrial revolution, if you want. This was also going with the, let's say, Europeanization of Europe, as I call it. Europe was Christendom before then, but after that time, Europe became Europe, or call itself Europe. So this is Europeanization of Europe, and in that case, or in that course, let's say, the liberal world order said or developed a narrative according to which it had a civilization mission, mission civilization, as we call in Turkish also. So this positivistic, or let's say materialist, or West or Europe oriented or centered world order started to develop a new kind of modern social sciences, let's say, in which they started to rewrite everything. They invented social sciences in general, as we all know, modern social sciences. And this included, or this one aspect of this was the monopoly of knowledge over everything, from economy to philosophy to tourism. Because you know what? Even in tourism books now, textbooks, they say that the first tourists were from Greece, ancient Greece. It's not the case. It's not true, we all know, but it's a fiction, and needed fiction. If you want to, establish a new world order, you have to start everything from your own history. You must be the 0 point of everything. In that context, archaeology also played its role, let's say, and in discovering the ancient Greece became the main standard of those days in archaeological studies, of course, and excavating classical archaeological sites and saying that the perfection, the whiteness, the morality, the being the most clever and wise on earth, or the only one, were sort of a natural thing in terms of the Western understanding, because everything started from I don't know if it's English, but in Turkish we call it asr-ı saadet. It's a sort of old good days, the golden age, let's say. It's a golden age. This not only gave those days those people the opportunity to reestablish themselves, but also to differentiate themselves from the medieval clerics and monarchs, or their understandings, but at the same time from the rest of the world, from the Orient and the Africans, And in social sciences, we all know that Orientalism and racism became the main guidebook in these initiatives. And of course, it was not only white and etc., etc., it was also masculine, because in all those excavations, whatever they found, they thought that they were made by men and by for men. As you can see today, we know very well that most of the cave art are made by women and children, actually. But still, in museums and in installations, you still see they are done by men. That's not correct. Or we see Venus statues, as you know. In all of we call them Venus because Venus means sort of, the symbol of beautifulness or whatever. So it's for men, or the taste of man, let's say. All these statues are made for the taste of man for the last 200,000 years, according to this understanding, but it's not correct, as we know. No, these statues are not Venus at all. They're all done in their own context, for their own context, whatever they are. We have to think about them. But the thing I want to emphasize here is this: the masculine attribution to these statues is actually showing us the perception or the paradigm shaping the minds of the archaeologists in those years. Of course, this included the myth of the 0 point. It is something to do with Anatolia as well, because we see Troy there. Troy is labeled as the starting 0 point of the history. By the way, nowadays, we say that it's Göbekli Tepe, not Troy. I don't know why. I will come on there as well. But, Schliemann and others, not archaeologues, maybe, I don't know, but they were trying to excavate things for their own, maybe fortuning or fame or whatever. But at the same time, they set the benchmark for the coming years. And then, these are all in line with the political engagements and needs of the Western civilization, by the way. But in the early 20th century, these are samples, of course, but two other countries or civilizations or societies or nations emerged and said they also have something to say regarding archaeological findings. One is from Israel and the other is from Turkey. One is biblical archaeology, the other is classical archaeology, as we call it in Turkey. And they wanted to show that they are also part of the European civilization, or the Western civilization, whatever. So the civilization emerged from their countries. They are part of that civilization. So they are not, they didn't position themselves with the savage one, let's say, the barbarians. They are civilized for sure. So they have to take their position or the place in that race, according to their understanding. But thanks to archaeometry in the mid-20th century, let's say, Americans, by the way, and the Soviet Union were on board also in those years. So they started to, let's say, de-Europeanize the archaeological studies and materialize the archaeological studies. And as we also see it from Turkey, this meant prehistorian excavations, which is Neolithic nowadays, basically, but we should think about Paleolithic as well. What did this mean? This meant that we, as a human race, let's say, had a very long history, not limited with the Western one. So we have things to do. We have things to research about the human history and other things. But it's not a surprise, according to me, that these were in line with the needs of the Western or American and the Soviet needs, by the way, because they wanted to de-Europeanize the world system, by the way, because they were the emerging two superpowers. So they wanted to rewrite the history from their perspective, just like the European did, by the way. But in 1970s, a new process started, which is called globalization in general. In this process, a new division of labor emerged in the world in terms of economy and social order. So it meant postmodernism in social sciences, which said that basically Europe or West cannot set the standard alone because everyone can have its own, his own, her own, their own values. So postmodernism meant proliferation of values. So in archaeology, this meant proliferation of excavations in various parts of the world. And they also tried or started to rewrite or read this history, as Inhotter said. They're reading the history means, according to our needs, we have to look at the history again and again. And descriptive archaeology is not good anymore, according to this understanding. So we have to change how we perceive archaeological findings, how we interpret them, how do we read them, how we publish about them, and etc. And this again had a result in Turkey as well, as you see. And a postmodern archaeological understanding meant we are again the 0 point of the world, but now from Göbekli Tepe, of course, as to someone as the first temple. So we as the Eastern West, or whatever you call, is the cradle of religion now, not civilization. We are still, or again, playing our part, to me, because in this new world order, we are still in the West, but we have to do something for the West or for the world order. So this is something to do with the new civilization understanding, which embraces all differences across the world. Okay, so we'll finish this first part with this again, because we should ask, we are different, but can they speak? I mean, can the past speak? Because archaeology actually is meant to understand or hear what the past says, but actually we are not hearing them. We are not giving an ear to them. We are just saying, you want to say this, you want to say that, but these are always according to our understandings today or our needs, as I try to demonstrate. So archaeopolitics, I mean, will at least suggest that it can be different. It should be different. We can do something. So what is archaeopolitics? I should start with, first of all, showing what archaeopolitics is not. Archaeopolitics is not suggesting sharing data and expertise in between these two disciplines, because this can be. Why not, by the way? But I'm not meant for, because many people do this, and it's not a new idea, by the way. You are not discovering the America, the second time. So archaeology cannot be this. Someone can do this, as I said, can do research on these issues, but archaeopolitics should do something more. Is it a new inter or trans-disciplinary discipline? No, because I don't want these two, I don't suggest these two disciplines to emerge and merge into archaeopolitics and vanish, because they have good expertise, they have a good history, they have experts and terminology and research area and everything. So there's no need to lose them. And every day we are needing more specialist guys doing research on various aspects of archaeology. So there is no need to give it up. So it's not that either. Is it reshaping or restructuring the established understanding of these two disciplines, using archaeopolitics as a mirror, I should say? No. No. It might be again, but no, because again, this can be done, or this is being done by many people, I should say, nowadays. I think archaeopolitics is a call for a new paradigm or a mindset, a new holistic approach. It's not a discipline, it's an approach, actually, or as I call it, as a new paradigm, a new mindset, which is an amodernist one. So what I say is this, when I mean what a paradigm shift. If I refer to the first line again, neither they nor we are different. we or they are just making the history within the context of the prevailing conditions and circumstances. So everyone is doing its role or playing its role within the conditions available to themselves. So things change. Of course, the methodology changes or culture changes, but at least at the end of the day, we can see that they are trying, or everyone is trying to survive, maybe, to have a normal life, a daily life. And archaeology in this aspect, or political science, is trying to understand the law and order in these two different areas or spaces and times. So there is an ancient law and order over there, okay, and there is a present law or contemporary law and order here. We are just trying to understand what shaped their understandings. So they are after the same questions or the same, let's say, problems or needs. For example, survival, feeding themselves, establishing a life, a daily life, running their daily life, or sports or whatever. All these things. So we have to understand, or we have to develop an understanding to think that, or be ready to accept that they are just the same in the basic terms. They're just after their life. So let me give some examples, and I think it will be more understandable. We think that as modern people, public sphere understanding is a very modern thing. Because in political science, when you talk about public sphere, they usually say that it became possible with modern state. The civil society and state itself made public sphere possible for all parts. But to me, when we controlled fire and domesticated it 700,000 years ago, we gathered around a campfire. We started to discuss, tell stories, manipulate people, say lies, and do politics. So we are doing politics at least for the last 700,000 years. And this is the case with, you can see this from the archaeological findings, because wherever you go in those archaeological sites, if you are ready to see things from this perspective, you can see that people did politics in their daily life, in the caves, in the camp, around the campfire, or in the basic shelters on other places. They did politics. So this is a public sphere. They used art and symbolism to manipulate others, to narrate their stories, to let's say stock their collective memory, and to convey it to the next generations. So to manipulate everyone. So from starting from Bereketra, some 250,000 years ago, we have a good symbolism, and nothing changed. Of course, many things change according to the culture and technology, etc., etc. But the thing that art is used for symbolism didn't change at all. This is the case for the last 250,000 years ago. Regarding belief, yes, we know that we will die someday. So because of that, we always want to understand or place ourselves in the universe. So this is something to do with knowing the unknown, or developing some beliefs regarding the unknown. The best example or best sample regarding this issue is how we bury or burn our dead. Because this is something to do, according to someone, this is something to do with the other world belief. But to me, this is not the case, by the way. This is a picture from India, as you see. They are burning, so their reincarnation is the answer according to them. So they have a cosmic unity belief, or recycling sort of, let's say. So if you compare it with 1,000 years old burial, things changed, but not in the sense that we mean in a linear way, in a cultural linear way. We can see some people who are believing in the other world, but there are also some people today who don't believe in that. They simply believe in reincarnation and etc. So belief has not changed at all. Regarding architecture, yes, at least for the last 25,000 years, we are constructing spatial buildings. But by the way, if you look at the way we deal with the caves, you see that there are some small constructions within the caves for the last 100,000 years. But it's a bit, questionable issue, let's say. But regarding this, the first picture over there on the left-hand side, you can see a mammoth building built in today's Ukraine, some 25,000 years ago. And this is possibly for a special gathering. And it's round and, it's closed like a cave, by the way, just like Göbekli Tepe, by the way, because Göbekli Tepe was also underground. It was also round. The only difference is it was made of stones and bricks. But still, we know that it's 10,000 years old, by the way. And today, if you go to the Security Council, that's my study area, you see that they are still gathering there around a round table. And this is something to do with the symbolism of equality. In the Security Council, this is fake, of course. But in Göbekli Tepe and in the Mammoth building, it's the fact, probably. It's a fact, because in those years, small groups were living in a more or less equal way. So in those spatial buildings, they were gathering like an assembly, and they were discussing issues regarding their daily life or their law and order, let's say. And to me, for example, the Göbekli Tepe site is the first United Nations site in the world made by stone, or it's also let's say, an assembly, also a courtyard, also everything, just like the Mammoth building, or the caves, by the way, are the same. Or if you look at Karahantepe, by the way, you can see the lodged area. So you just understand that people started to live in a stratified society. So, things change according to how you, establish or order your society. In terms of trade, we usually tend to think that trade is something very modern or new thing. But if you look at the archaeological findings, there is trade for the last 100,000 years, at least, because you can see seashells, in very remote places for those years. Or you can see lapis lazuli in, let's say, the Bronze Age, or even in the Chalcolithic, from very remote areas, from India or other places. And today, only means and technology is changing, and the trade is now a global thing. The scale has changed only, I should say. The understanding didn't change, because we always needed to exchange things that we don't have. This also made people relatives, let's say, or doing business is always a good cooperation thing, as we all know. Capitalism, the most interesting and striking according to my issue. Most people say that capitalism is a very modern thing. Okay, in modern terms, yes. But there is a very good article, I should say, you see over there, Animals as a Capital. And this is now being proved in southeastern Turkey nowadays, because we know that there are big hunting traps built just around Göbekli Tepe and Karahantepe in those areas. In those hunting traps, people try to, capture hundreds of animals within a hunting trap area, and they closed with a fence the entrance area. So they kept hundreds of, they had livestock, by the way, just like the English says today, livestock under their control. So they slaughtered them whenever they wanted. So if you look at the conditions prevailing in those days, if you want to build such constructions, at least 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 villages should cooperate. So I think this also explains how Göbekli Tepe is made, because to me, people decided how to build these hunting traps in places like Göbekli Tepe, and they also shared the profit there. So if you have a profit, if you have a livestock, if you have animals as livestock, this is sort of capitalism, by the way, because it's a profitable investment, So it changed the whole, economical system, by the way, because after that, as you all know, settled life turned into a Neolithic agricultural society, which also triggered stratified societies in 2000 or 3000 years time. Regarding distribution issue, I also have another example. This is a long history, but I have a small piece written in Turkish in actual archaeology, in which I argue that liver is the first surplus in those years, because we see that both the shamans and the young hunters were conflicting over the usage of the liver. Shaman wanted to use it for fortune telling, but the young hunters wanted to swallow it because they needed energy after, running after a mammoth for, let's say, 2 or 3 days. So this meant we, as we are doing politics, by the way, we are very keen about, or very ambitious about this redistribution issue. As you can also see from here, the other picture, all shamans not only used liver, but also used head, bones, skins, and other unusable materials of the animals, which meant they not used things for the good of the society, because it was the symbol of shamanism, which meant non-usable items became surplus value, had a surplus value in those years. So this is also a redistribution conflict, to my understanding, if you look at from an archaeopolitics point of view. Regarding health and medicine, we tend to think that it started at least by the ancient Greece. Okay, they did many things, by the way, no worries. But we know that at least for the last 30,000 years, we have some, at least, by the way, 100,000 years, by the way, sorry, from these flowers found or seeds found, pollens found in the burials, we see that they are used for some anti-inflammatory purposes. Or you can see the Gargas hands, as you know, they are amputation things, most probably, by the way. And at least we can assume that there are people who knew how to ampute someone. They used some seeds or maybe sometimes honey or some fungi or other things for, for the operation, or before the operation, I should say. But also we know that there is a brain surgery in Aşıklık, which is 10,000 years old. And I'm sure you have some friends from this area. If you ask them, they will tell you that it's even today, it's very hard to open a hole on a skull. But they use obsidian, which is very sharp, as you know. And they did this 10,000 years ago, which meant they were trying to heal someone. Successful or not, this is not a case for us. But they tried to do that, which means healing, survival, or surviving is the main issue, or was the main issue for them as well. And it's nothing new. And we all know that in ancient Egypt, 2,000 years before Hippocrates, they also developed an oath for Imhotep oath, which meant, and by the way, Egyptians were very good in surgery and medicine and health issues, as you all know. And regarding law, my area, let's say, we all know that if you have a society, you have law, because you cannot run a society, their daily life without legal rules, and you have to have a sort of a judge or court and rules and penalties and whatever sanctions and all these things. And we all know that starting from the Sumerians, we have written law codes. And also we have international law, because now we have states, but in ancient times, in prehistory, I should say, I also think that they had some sort of international law, because if you look at some hunter and gatherer societies today, they have interesting rules regarding international law. For example, when they want to declare ceasefire, they use white things, sort of cotton or a piece of white texture or whatever, where if they want to ask for ceasefire, they put the spear on the ground, which means I will not fight with you. So they have their own ways of doing international law or rules. And here you can see from the Sumerian area, the kuduru is over there in the middle. Kuduru means the border stone over which all the laws of the region is written. So everyone knew the rules of the territory he or she is entering. So this is also a good case for us, good example for us. By the way, regarding international law, the most concrete and interesting and important, according to me, case is the Amarna letters from the 13th century or 14th century BC. In those letters, we can see that the Hittites and the Egyptians and the Assyrians and the Babylonians are always, and sometimes Cyprus, today's Cyprus, are always writing to each other regarding legal issues in between their relations. For example, I also wrote a piece about that regarding law of the sea and Amarna letters. And in that, you can see that they developed very detailed rules regarding customs, regarding embargo, regarding how to treat with the visitors in the ports, regarding passport rules, and etc., etc. So there are very other options for young researchers to look at in the Amarna letters. I'm sure they will find many other examples regarding other aspects of international law, because there are many, as I said. So they also had international law. And regarding sports, we tend to think that it's a modern thing, but sports is something very, very old, actually, because sports is not for sports in those days. And actually today, it's just a folkloric thing maybe, but in those years, sports were for hunting and gathering. Because etymologically, we know that game in archaeology means hunt, by the way, prey, but it also means play for the kids. And the same in Turkish, we call it oyun, but in Old Turkish, oyun means av, hunt, in Central Asia today. So it shows us that in our far remote past, let's say, people use sports to practice for the hunt, to practice for the war later on, maybe. So sports is something to do with developing yourselves, perfection of the body, and for power, of course. Nowadays we are using it for, let's say, socializing our kids, because they have to develop their bodies, their minds, how to cooperate, how to resolve a conflict, by the way. So sports gives you that opportunity. But by the way, sports also gives you the opportunity to settle your disputes without war. Because if you do that, you discharge your energy. Okay, it's a sort of catharsis. Someone wins symbolically, the other loses symbolically. So the order goes on. So everyone is happy, by the way. So sports is also not a recent thing or modern thing either. So as a result, I'm just trying to say that we all do things in our own ways. We are trying to live and raise our children in a way that makes them, sturdy or, powerful enough or flexible enough or adaptable enough to survive. Because we all know that we will die, but we all know that we must forget that we will die. Otherwise, we cannot live. So in order to make our lives better, we have to do things to, feed ourselves, for example, to settle the disputes with others and other things, etc., etc. So, sorry for the brief summary of the archaeopolitics, but that's all I want to say today, and I'm ready for your questions. Thank you.
Very much. I'll just go here. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm really very happy that we got a chance to hear more about your perspectives. And I have some questions, but first I would like the audience, if they have any any questions or any questions from the Zoom audience as well. So I would like to open the floor for questions. Do we have?
Not yet.
Okay, then I start. Yeah, I'm going to start with something. Do you think that this obsession about the cradle of civilizations, this 0 point in history or religion, obsession,
Good point.
how does it affect the public perception? Because public perception about the past. Because you also mentioned and underlined, and I totally agree with you, that we are actually more similar than different. But when we carry the discussion to Cradle of Civilizations to a certain point, Işık Doğu'dan Yükselir versus the Cradle of
Orientalization and Occidentalism, let's say.
Exactly. How does this, according to you, affect the current public perception about the past and archaeology?
The obsession. Thank you. As I said, we all know that we will die, so we want to hear good stories about our past and future. Otherwise, we cannot feel powerful enough, maybe. I don't know. So also we live in a world in which, in an asymmetric world, let's say, we know that there are powerful countries and people, and there are Palestinians or blacks or, the savage or the subaltern everywhere. So even in Ankara, even in the world, it's a matter of scale, by the way. So you want to hear good stories that makes us feel better. And at least we want to win on the table, maybe. And we also think that, I think, if we believe in these stories and we pursue, these stories, let's say, in one day in the future, maybe we will be also powerful, and we will have the chance to rule the others, as just aided to us. So I think masses, let's say, I should say, need power, especially if they feel that they are powerless. So I think the answer should be this: if we really give people some power in terms of how they feed themselves and in their daily life, if we give them equality, I should say, they at least would not need that big lies to feel better, or obsession, as you say. They won't need good answers for their obsessions. Hopefully.
Can you say a little bit more about this inferiority superiority complex when it comes to the introduction of this idea that the civilization starts from a certain point? Because what I am thinking, what I have in mind is whenever we do field work, like ethnographic field work with the communities that are living next to the archaeological sites, there is this narrative that they always say, these people were better than us. So there is kind of like, so I am wondering whether they bought this story about, Cradle of Civilizations being somewhere else and we came afterwards.
Yeah, people know their conditions, by the way. I will give you another example from the Sumerian age. In those years, Amurus, the people called Amurus, were living in the West, and Amuru also meant barbarian. Why? Because those people were living out of the state society, and state society was something new and a progressed one. So they thought that they were civilized, the others were barbarians. The civilized was living in the southern Mesopotamia in today's terms. So, the world order changes every 500 years, let's say. And every time it changes, the center or the gravity of center changes, economically, socially, ideologically, or everything. So the new center develops its own ideology, and the periphery knows that it's now a periphery. So it feels inferior. But once upon a time, they were superior. So they have the superiority complex at the same time. The British and the Turkish are alike in this matter, because we were very good in the past. We had empires. But now we know that we are not that good. So the inferiority complex and superiority complex are always at the same, hand in hand. So, it changed according to the place, of course. If you ask this to a guy living in Greece, for example, I will give you another example. I read an article regarding Greek Neolithical studies, and they say that we don't want to hear anything about Neolithics. Why, they ask? Because it means that classical archaeology is not the answer. And it will mean that we are not the 0 point. The guy living in Urfa likes Göbekli Tepe very much because it says that, oh, everything started here. But I'm sure in 50 years' time, a guy from China will come and say, oh, the Peking man, and the other guys, pottery started here 20,000 years ago. And he's right, by the way, So we will rewrite the history according to the world order, new world order. And in those years, they will, feel like that. And the others will have obsessions, by the way. So in short, everyone knows the conditions they are living in. Everyone knows which part of the world is more progressed economically, socially, ideologically, or whatever, because of this, migration, gastarbeiters, cultural exchange, football matches, and songs and everything. So we, from schools, if you go to the school in a, British city or in an Anatolian city, you will see how people think there, right? Because they're raised in a family and they're in a social life environment in the school. So they are all gathering the ideas and everything, as this picture shows, by the way. As you see over there, two women is probably showing their kids how to gather something. And here, we are also trying to teach our kids how to do this. And within this context, we are giving all our complexes, obsessions, and everything. We are just, putting them on them. So that stands right.
We have one comment from Keith Raffan online, and I quote, isn't it an oversimplification to suggest that in the 19th century, Troy was seen as a 0 point? To give just a couple of examples, it ignores Napoleon's invasion of Egypt in 1798, which led to the birth of Egyptology. And then there is, of course, the advent of biblical archaeology.
Yes, I agree. But at the end of the day, today, both in Turkey and in the world, Troy is marked as the first encounter between West and East. It's not Egypt. Egypt is seen as a past and remote good example maybe to someone, but Troy is the place where the barbarian, by the way, the Persians, and the civilized Greeks met. That's what I meant. So thank you.
Persians and Greeks meet in Troy?
I mean, no, not Troy. Thank you. In that Homer's understanding, I should say. Sorry. Not Persians, the East, in the Troy. Okay, let me explain it. In the Troy myth, it's said that the barbarian East and the barbarian West encountered. And this is a myth invented by Homer, as you all know. And in that invention, it was done because the Persians and the Greeks were making war. So if you want to combine or force the small city-states in the Aegean area against the Persians, you have to tell them a history, narrate a history saying that they are we. They make a V for the last 500 years. In those years, they invented the Troy myth, let's say. So in the 19th century, the Germans, let's say, or the modern social scientists, I should say, reinvented what Homer invented. This is what I want to say. We can discuss if you want later on. But by the way, this is an archaeological fact. Isn't it? You said yes? You don't agree? Okay. Thank you.
I would like to thank you all and our audience on Zoom. We have a small reception here
Thank you.
at the Institute. So next time, Zoom audience, we are waiting for you at the BIA. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much, Erdem.
Thank you very much.